Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Tonight's question isn't, who is Cthulhu? It's simpler and more unsettling. Who serves him? Not symbolically, not as fiction alone, but in patterns of thought, behavior, and belief, across stories, across time. If you clicked for entertainment, this may not be the video you expected, but if you've noticed how certain ideas repeat, adapt, and refuse to disappear, then you're already inside the subject. We'll start at the source, what Lovecraft actually wrote and what he implied. Then we'll examine what lies beneath the servants. Why madness often isn't madness. Why worship isn't always a choice. And why some servants may never use the name Cthulhu at all. This isn't a list, it's an investigation. And here's the pause worth taking. Attention is never neutral. You don't need belief, only focus. That's how these ideas work. So don't ask if Cthulhu is real. Ask why servitude already feels so familiar. Now, let's begin with the origins. The creation of Cthulhu and its servants can be better understood through the historical lens of early 20th century upheaval. This period, marked by the horrors of industrialization, the collapse of traditional beliefs, and the unprecedented scale of global conflict, saw a shift in humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. As the scientific revolution and modernist movements challenged centuries of theological and metaphysical certainty, a sense of cosmic insignificance began to take root in popular thought. Lovecraft, born in 1890, was deeply influenced by these changes, and his works reflect both the anxieties and the intellectual ferment of his time. World War I, in particular, was a catalytic event, stripping away the illusion of human progress and revealing the fragility of life. The war, with its industrialized destruction, laid bare the vulnerability of human civilization. Lovecraft, who lived through the horrors of the Great War but was not directly involved, nonetheless felt its effects on a profound philosophical level. The brutality of modern conflict, coupled with the decline of imperialist powers, seemed to underscore the futility of human endeavor in the face of larger, uncontrollable forces. This sense of cosmic impotence, the recognition that humanity was at the mercy of forces far beyond its understanding, was central to Lovecraft's worldview and informed his creation of the mythos. At the heart of this existential shift was the collapse of the anthropocentric worldview. For centuries, Western thought had been centered on the idea that humanity was the pinnacle of creation, the image of a divine and purposeful cosmos. The advent of Darwinism, quantum mechanics, and relativity radically shifted this paradigm. In Lovecraft's time, the realization that humans were not the center of the universe was becoming increasingly inescapable. The cosmos was vast, indifferent, and largely unknowable. Against this backdrop, Lovecraft's works introduced the idea of servitude to ancient, powerful beings, like Cthulhu, as an expression of humanity's existential response to its own insignificance. For Lovecraft, these beings were not gods in the traditional sense, but primal forces of nature, ancient and incomprehensible. The idea of servitude in this context is not rooted in the worship of a benevolent deity, but in the tragic acceptance of humanity's helplessness in the face of cosmic indifference. The servants of Cthulhu, unlike typical cultists or worshippers in traditional horror fiction, are not necessarily driven by devotion, but by an overwhelming realization that resistance is futile. They serve because, in their exposure to the greater truths of the universe, they have lost the capacity to do otherwise. Lovecraft's portrayal of these servants is a reflection of his broader thematic concerns. His writings are filled with individuals who come into contact with forbidden knowledge and, as a result, are driven to madness or despair. The servants of Cthulhu, while not always presented as central figures, embody this core idea. They are not fanatics who seek to impose their will upon the world, but rather individuals who, in their exposure to cosmic horrors, relinquish their will entirely. This portrayal of servitude as an inevitable reaction to forbidden knowledge underscores the futility of human agency in a universe governed by forces beyond comprehension. In the case of Cthulhu and its servants, Lovecraft's intent was clear. He sought to expose the fragility of the human condition when confronted with the vast, unknowable universe. These servants are not depicted as malevolent figures, but as tragic participants in a cosmic drama they do not fully understand. Their servitude is not a conscious choice, but rather a form of surrender to a greater, uncontrollable force. This portrayal invites readers to reflect on their own place in the universe. What happens when humanity confronts the realization that it is but a fleeting moment in an incomprehensible cosmos? This realization, that servitude is not a choice, but a result of exposure to overwhelming truth, lays the foundation for understanding how these servants function within the broader Cthulhu mythos. The next step is to explore the cultural and philosophical antecedents that help shape Lovecraft's conception of servitude. It is here, in the echoes of ancient myth and modern existential thought, that we begin to trace the origins of the servants of Cthulhu and their disturbing significance. To fully understand the concept of servitude in Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, we must consider its roots in earlier cultural and philosophical traditions. Lovecraft was not working in a vacuum. His stories draw on a rich tapestry of mythological, religious, and philosophical ideas that have shaped humanity's conception of the divine, the unknown, and the cosmic. These influences, ranging from ancient Mesopotamian deities to the existentialism of the early 20th century, provide the necessary foundation for understanding why his servants are not mere cultists, but rather tragic figures ensnared by the cosmic indifference of the universe. First, we must look back to the ancient mythologies that predate Lovecraft's work. Many of the themes in the Cthulhu mythos, particularly the concepts of ancient, otherworldly beings and the insignificance of humanity, can be traced to the ancient Near East. In Mesopotamian mythology, for example, gods like Tiamat and Enki embody cosmic forces that operate outside the realm of human understanding. These deities were not anthropocentric. They did not exist for the benefit of humanity, but rather as part of a larger cosmic order. Servitude to these beings was not based on loyalty or love, but rather on fear, respect, and the acceptance of their overwhelming power. Similarly, in other ancient cultures, gods and supernatural beings were often depicted as distant, indifferent forces, not concerned with human welfare. This is especially true in Greek mythology, where gods like Chaos and Nyx represent primal forces beyond human comprehension. The Greek gods themselves, though more anthropomorphic, were far from benevolent. They were driven by personal vendettas and desires, indifferent to human suffering. Lovecraft's own great old ones, including Cthulhu, reflect this same ancient conception of deities as distant, alien, and uncaring, reinforcing the theme that humanity's existence is insignificant in the grand cosmic scheme. These ancient deities were not always worshipped out of love or admiration. Rather, the relationship was often one of submission and survival. servants in Lovecraft's mythos mirror this dynamic. Rather than voluntary worship or devotion, their servitude is a result of exposure to forbidden knowledge, ancient truths, and forces that lie beyond human comprehension. This servitude is not a moral choice, but a consequence of confronting realities that the human mind was never meant to grasp. The philosophical underpinnings of Lovecraft's work also draw heavily from the emerging ideas of existentialism and nihilism in the early 20th century. Thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Jean-Paul Sartre explored the idea that life has no inherent meaning, and that individuals must confront the void of an indifferent universe. This philosophical framework finds its way into Lovecraft's stories, where the characters' encounter with cosmic entities like Cthulhu leads them to confront the meaningless vastness of existence. In a universe that operates without any moral or teleological purpose, servitude to these cosmic beings becomes not a choice, but a tragic, inevitable consequence of understanding humanity's place in an uncaring cosmos. In existentialist thought, the concept of the absurd is central. The absurd is the conflict between the human desire for meaning and the universe's indifference to that desire. Servants of Cthulhu embody this absurdity. They seek meaning in a universe that offers none. Their servitude is not a conscious pursuit of purpose, but an acceptance of the absurd, a surrender to forces far beyond their comprehension. They are not so much followers as they are victims of the revelation that their lives have no greater significance in the grand, uncaring cosmos. Finally, Lovecraft's servants can be viewed as an extension of the Western tradition of the otherworldly cult in literature. From the medieval Christian concept of heresy to the occult traditions of the 19th century, cults have often been portrayed as societies that are drawn to knowledge or power that is forbidden by mainstream society. However, Lovecraft's cultists differ significantly from traditional depictions. Rather than seeking power or enlightenment, they are often portrayed as pawns in a much larger game. Their servitude is not driven by the promise of transcendence, but by the terrifying realization that they are insignificant in the face of an uncaring universe. This shift in the portrayal of cults, from active agents of rebellion to tragic doomed figures, marks one of Lovecraft's most significant contributions to horror literature. Lovecraft's servants are not the first to serve ancient, indifferent forces, but his conception of servitude adds a unique twist. It is not a matter of seeking power or favor, but rather an inevitable consequence of confronting cosmic truth. This conception of servitude, rooted in ancient myth and modern philosophy, lays the foundation for understanding the tragic nature of the servants in the Cthulhu Mythos. As we move forward, we will explore the etymology and symbolic language used to describe these servants. This will allow us to better understand how Lovecraft's choice of language reinforces the themes of cosmic indifference and the inevitability of servitude. The language of servitude in the mythos is not simply a matter of ritual or worship, but a reflection of the deeper philosophical and existential themes at the core of Lovecraft's work. To fully appreciate the significance of servitude in the Cthulhu Mythos, it is essential to examine the language Lovecraft employed to depict his cosmic horrors and their human servants. Lovecraft's choice of words and symbolic language is not arbitrary. Every term, from cultist to priest, carries a weight of meaning that reinforces the broader philosophical and existential themes of his work. In particular, the language used to describe servitude, whether through the titles of those who serve Cthulhu or the rituals they perform, reflects the bleak reality of human existence in an indifferent universe. Lovecraft's linguistic choices often emphasize the degradation of human identity and the collapse of meaning when faced with the incomprehensible. Consider, for instance, the way Lovecraft refers to those who serve Cthulhu. They are rarely given clear, fixed titles. Instead, terms like worshipper, acolyte, servant, and cultist appear interchangeably, often without deeper exploration of their individual significance. The lack of clear distinction between these titles is deliberate. It serves to dehumanize those who fall under the influence of Cthulhu, presenting them not as autonomous individuals, but as faceless members of a collective, their identities subsumed by a cosmic will they cannot comprehend. This linguistic ambiguity underscores the central theme of Lovecraft's work, that humans, when confronted with the vastness of the cosmos, lose their sense of self, becoming mere instruments of forces beyond their control. Moreover, Lovecraft's use of religious language is also telling. Terms like priest, temple, and sacrifice are often employed in relation to Cthulhu's servants, yet they are never imbued with the traditional spiritual significance one might expect. Rather than portraying these figures as devoted worshippers in the traditional sense, Lovecraft's language frames them as passive participants in an ongoing cosmic process. The ritualistic language is not about spiritual transcendence, but about inevitable submission to something far greater and more alien than any human deity. This subtle redefinition of religious language reflects the core of Lovecraft's philosophy, that any attempt to impose meaning or structure on the cosmos is ultimately futile. The cosmic entities do not demand worship in the sense that human gods do. They simply exist, indifferent to human concerns, and those who serve them do so out of a forced resignation to their power. In addition to the absence of clear titles, Lovecraft frequently uses the language of decay and disintegration to describe his servants and their rituals. Words like rotting, decayed, and corrupted frequently appear in his descriptions, evoking a sense of moral and physical degradation. This imagery ties into Lovecraft's broader existential message. Humanity's encounter with the vastness of the cosmos leads to an inevitable disintegration of the self. The human mind, when exposed to the incomprehensible truths of the universe, cannot retain its former structure. It breaks down, and in doing so, aligns itself with forces that are beyond its ability to understand. The servants of Cthulhu, in their servitude, are not made whole or enlightened. They are slowly eroded, becoming more like the alien entities they revere. Consider also the repeated use of dreams in Lovecraft's stories. The language of dreams is key to understanding the servitude of Cthulhu's followers, as it represents the liminal space between consciousness and the unknowable. Cthulhu, often depicted as a being from the depths of the sea or the far reaches of space, exists in a realm that is outside of ordinary human perception. His servants, then, are often depicted as those who receive his instructions not through direct worship, but through dreams, visions that slowly seep into their consciousness and erode their sense of reality. The dream imagery serves as a metaphor for the gradual distortion of the mind, as it comes into contact with ideas that defy human comprehension. Servants are thus not only followers in the traditional sense. They are individuals whose mental and emotional landscapes are permanently altered by their exposure to the unknowable. The symbolic weight of these linguistic choices is compounded by the way in which Lovecraft's servants are often depicted in ritualistic settings. Rituals, in Lovecraft's stories, are not celebratory or redemptive. They are often described as grim, inevitable actions performed in service to something larger and more terrifying than anything human beings can fathom. The language of sacrifice, decay, and dreams all contribute to the portrayal of these rituals as something that strips away the participants' individuality, rendering them as mere instruments of cosmic forces. The use of ritual language in this context underscores the tragic nature of the servants. They are not willfully participating in an act of devotion. They are following through with actions that they believe are necessary to maintain their fragile grasp on sanity in the face of incomprehensible truths. In Lovecraft's universe, words are not just tools for communication. They are instruments of psychological influence. The symbolic language used to describe the servants of Cthulhu is not merely decorative. It actively shapes the reader's understanding of the characters and their relationship to the universe. The lack of fixed titles, the use of decay imagery, and the frequent invocation of dreams all serve to reinforce the central theme of servitude. That in the face of a cosmic order, indifferent to human existence, those who serve Cthulhu do so not out of choice, but as a consequence of their exposure to forces beyond their understanding. This symbolic language is crucial for understanding how Lovecraft's portrayal of servitude differs from more traditional depictions in horror literature. Rather than focusing on overt devotion or ritual, Lovecraft's servants are shown as individuals whose identities and actions are irrevocably shaped by their encounters with an indifferent cosmos. This analysis of the language of servitude sets the stage for our next subsection, where we will examine the myth-building process in Lovecraft's works and how he created a narrative authenticity that blurred the lines between fiction and reality, further immersing readers in the eerie world of the Cthulhu Mythos. One of the most distinctive features of Lovecraft's work is the way he constructs a sense of narrative authenticity that blurs the lines between fiction and reality. The concept of servitude to Cthulhu and to other great old ones is not just presented as a fictional construct, but as part of a greater mythos that feels, at times, almost real. Lovecraft's use of myth-building techniques, journals, letters, cryptic references, and the integration of historical-sounding names creates a sense of verisimilitude that draws readers into a world that feels eerily plausible. This blending of fact and fiction is not just an aesthetic choice. It serves a deeper philosophical purpose, to suggest that the horrors Lovecraft describes are not confined to fiction, but are merely hidden beneath the surface of reality, awaiting discovery by those who dare to look too deeply. One of the key methods Lovecraft uses to establish this narrative authenticity is the inclusion of documents that suggest the existence of the Cthulhu Mythos outside the stories themselves. In The Call of Cthulhu, for example, Lovecraft introduces the account of Professor Angel, whose research into the ancient cults and the Cthulhu idol is presented as legitimate academic inquiry. The document, complete with citations and scholarly language, makes it appear as though the reader is privy to a secret academic revelation. By framing the story as a discovery of forbidden knowledge, Lovecraft turns the act of reading into an act of complicity. Those who follow the narrative are also, in a sense, uncovering a truth that could drive them to madness, just as the characters in the story experience. This narrative style, which emphasizes the presence of hidden or suppressed knowledge, reinforces the thematic undercurrent of cosmic horror. That humanity's understanding of the universe is incomplete, and any attempt to fully comprehend it will lead to existential collapse. The servants of Cthulhu, who are often portrayed as scholars, investigators, or artists driven by an obsessive search for truth, are presented in a similar light. They are not mere victims of a malevolent god, but rather individuals who, by pursuing knowledge, have found themselves irrevocably altered. Lovecraft's use of letters and academic texts creates the illusion that these servants and their actions are part of a larger, hidden reality. The implication is clear. The forces that drive these cults and their followers are not confined to fiction, but are part of a broader cosmic order that exists just out of sight. Lovecraft's integration of these real elements into his stories extends beyond just the use of documents. He frequently names actual places, both real and fictionalized, to ground the narrative in a reality that feels familiar to readers. Cities like Arkham, Innsmouth, and Dunwich, though invented by Lovecraft, are given such detailed histories and geographic specificity that they feel as though they could exist in the real world. These places become sites of human intervention with the unknown, where the normal world collides with the dark undercurrents of the mythos. This grounding in recognizable reality enhances the sense of unease that permeates Lovecraft's work. These places are not imaginary realms, but distorted reflections of the world we know, places where the unnatural is allowed to seep through the cracks. This technique of mixing the familiar with the alien is central to the way Lovecraft constructs the mythology surrounding Cthulhu and its servants. By referencing real historical events, figures, and places, Lovecraft transforms his fiction into a lost history of sorts, one that suggests that the dark forces in his stories are not merely works of imagination, but suppressed truths about the universe. In this way, the servants of Cthulhu are not just characters in a fictional universe. They are representations of a deeper, hidden reality that lies just beneath the surface of everyday life. The reader is invited to entertain the possibility that these cults, these servants, could exist somewhere in the real world, operating in the shadows, their existence known only to a select few. Moreover, the myth-building process also extends to the creation of arcane texts and occult knowledge, such as the Necronomicon. Lovecraft's invented tome, referenced throughout his stories, further blurs the line between fact and fiction. The Necronomicon is presented not as a fictional creation, but as a lost grimoire that, in Lovecraft's universe, is known to certain scholars and occultists. Its supposed author, Abdul al-Hazred, is described as a real figure who once walked the earth, linking the text to the historical world in a way that invites belief in its existence. This creates a sense of historical authenticity. If the Necronomicon were to be discovered, it would not be a work of fiction, but a rediscovered fragment of a lost and dangerous history. The blending of history with fiction is a key part of what makes Lovecraft's work so unsettling. The servants of Cthulhu are not simply figures in a fantastical narrative, but participants in a mythos that feels like it could be part of our own world. Lovecraft's stories do not tell us that Cthulhu is real, but they present the possibility that it might be, hidden beneath the surface of reality, just as the servants themselves remain hidden in plain sight. This narrative ambiguity makes the Cthulhu mythos so compelling, as it forces the reader to question whether the horrors Lovecraft describes are confined to the realm of fiction, or if they are merely waiting to be uncovered in the dark corners of human history. This technique of creating a mythos that feels both real and unknowable is central to understanding the servants of Cthulhu. Their servitude is not just a matter of ritual or belief. It is an acknowledgement that there are truths in the universe that are beyond human comprehension, truths that drive people to seek knowledge, even at the cost of their own sanity. As we move into the next section, we will explore the nature of these servants, what drives them, how they interact with the world, and the philosophical implications of their submission to the cosmic forces of the mythos. The philosophical backbone of the Cthulhu Mythos, and by extension the servitude of its followers, revolves around concepts that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about existence. The key concepts, insignificance, entropy, and dream reality, define the thematic framework of Lovecraft's work. Together, they present a worldview that positions humanity not as the center of the universe, but as a fleeting anomaly in an indifferent, ever-decaying cosmos. These ideas form the foundation upon which the servants of Cthulhu are built, as their servitude is both a result of and a response to these overwhelming existential truths. At the heart of Lovecraft's philosophical outlook is the idea of insignificance. In a universe governed by vast, uncaring forces, humanity is but a brief, inconsequential speck. This idea rejects the anthropocentric worldview that has historically placed humans at the center of creation. Lovecraft's vision is one where human existence is not special or purposeful, but rather a momentary aberration in the grand, indifferent cosmos. The servitude of Cthulhu's followers, then, is not a result of devotion or faith, but a tragic acknowledgement of humanity's utter irrelevance in the cosmic order. They are not pawns in a grand, purposeful scheme, but rather actors caught in the current of an indifferent universe. Their service to Cthulhu is not motivated by loyalty or spiritual fulfillment, but by a recognition of the futility of resistance. Lovecraft explores this idea of insignificance most directly in The Call of Cthulhu, where the protagonist uncovers ancient, forbidden knowledge about Cthulhu's existence and its worshippers. Upon learning the truth, he is struck not with awe, but with despair. The universe is revealed to be a place where human concerns, beliefs, and values are meaningless in the face of cosmic forces. The protagonist's discovery, rather than empowering him, breaks him, leading him to the realization that he is a powerless observer in a universe that operates according to its own alien logic. In this way, Lovecraft suggests that the ultimate horror is not external malevolence, but the awareness of one's own insignificance, a theme that is central to the servitude of Cthulhu's followers. They serve not because they seek to control these forces, but because they have come to terms with their own helplessness in the face of them. Closely tied to the concept of insignificance is entropy, the inevitable decay and destruction of all things. In Lovecraft's worldview, the cosmos is not progressing toward any higher purpose or order, but is instead moving toward universal decay. The great old ones, including Cthulhu, embody this theme of cosmic entropy. They are ancient, godlike beings whose very existence is a reminder of the inevitable disintegration of all things: human civilization, life, and even time itself. Servants of Cthulhu, in their worship, are not engaging in a noble pursuit of transcendence or enlightenment, but are participating in a process of decay. Their servitude reflects their acknowledgement of the universe's intrinsic disorder and entropy, and their recognition that there is no hope of reversing or escaping this process. This philosophical underpinning is evident in stories like The Shadow over Innsmouth, where the protagonist discovers that the town's inhabitants are not simply cultists, but creatures that have been subjected to a slow, inevitable transformation. The decay is both physical and spiritual. The inhabitants of Innsmouth have been transformed by their interactions with the ancient, decaying forces of the Deep Ones. This transformation is presented as a form of servitude to these ancient beings, one that is not chosen, but forced upon them by the inexorable passage of time and the decay of the human body. The townspeople's gradual loss of their humanity is a metaphor for the inevitable entropy that governs the universe. In the mythos, servitude is not an act of conscious devotion. It is an unavoidable consequence of being exposed to the uncaring forces of cosmic entropy. Another core concept that shapes the servitude of Cthulhu's followers is dream reality. In Lovecraft's universe, dreams are not just random, disconnected thoughts during sleep. They are a portal to a deeper, darker reality. The boundary between dream and reality is fluid in the mythos, and the knowledge of the great old ones is often conveyed through dreams, visions that reveal cosmic truths too overwhelming for the waking mind to comprehend. These dreams, however, are not simply comforting escapism, but a source of madness and despair. They offer glimpses into a reality where human concerns are meaningless and where the vastness of the universe overwhelms the individual. The dream state serves as a metaphor for the collapse of human understanding and the breakdown of the self, as individuals come face to face with the cosmic forces that lie beyond their comprehension. In the dream quest of unknown Kadath, the protagonist Randolph Carter journeys through a dream world that is simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. The dreams he experiences are filled with alien landscapes and beings that defy logic, reflecting the deep, unsettling truth that the universe operates according to its own rules, regardless of human understanding. The dream realm, in this context, becomes both a literal and figurative space, where the boundaries of reality are erased and the characters are exposed to cosmic truths that break their minds and reshape their identities. Similarly, the servants of Cthulhu are often depicted as those who have crossed into this dreamlike realm, where the lines between the waking world and the cosmic horror blur. They are not simply worshippers in the traditional sense, but individuals who have been irreversibly changed by their exposure to a reality that is beyond human comprehension. The concept of dream reality thus plays a pivotal role in understanding the servitude of Cthulhu's followers. It is through dreams, symbols of humanity's exposure to an incomprehensible universe, that the servants come to their tragic realization that they are not masters of their own fate, but passive participants in a cosmic system that cares little for their existence. These dreams are not a form of enlightenment, but a source of degradation, as they strip away any illusions of human significance and replace them with a terrifying awareness of the universe's indifferent vastness. As we move forward, we will explore the entities or forces that these servants serve. It is through these forces, Cthulhu and the other great old ones, that the core philosophical concepts of insignificance, entropy, and dream reality come to life. By examining the entities that drive the servants, we will gain a deeper understanding of the cosmic system in which they exist and the unrelenting forces that govern their actions. At the heart of the Cthulhu mythos lies a pantheon of ancient, unknowable entities, each representing a different facet of cosmic horror, power, and indifference. These entities, including Cthulhu himself, are not gods in the traditional sense, but primordial beings whose existence precedes human understanding and whose motivations are beyond human comprehension. In this section, we will explore the nature of these entities, how they influence the servants who worship them, and why their existence and power so profoundly affect the human mind. The forces that drive the servants of Cthulhu are not concerned with earthly concerns or human morality. They exist outside the bounds of time and space, and their influence is both subtle and pervasive. The most prominent of these entities is Cthulhu, the ancient cosmic being that lies dormant beneath the ocean in the sunken city of R'lyeh. Cthulhu is often described as a monstrous octopoid creature with vast wings and a colossal form, but his true nature is far beyond physical description. He is not simply a creature of flesh and bone. He is a symbol of cosmic power, a being whose very presence distorts the fabric of reality. Cthulhu embodies the central themes of Lovecraft's work: the insignificance of humanity, the futility of resistance, and the unknowable vastness of the cosmos. To encounter Cthulhu is not merely to meet a godlike figure, but to face the crushing realization that the universe operates on a scale far beyond human comprehension. The worship of Cthulhu and the servitude of his followers is thus not motivated by the typical religious desire for salvation or enlightenment. Instead, it is a response to the horrifying revelation that the universe is indifferent to human existence. Cthulhu's servants do not worship out of love or devotion, but out of a recognition that they are powerless in the face of an overwhelming ancient force. This realization leads to a form of resigned submission. They serve because there is nothing else to do. The true horror lies not in the idea of Cthulhu's power, but in the awareness that humans are inconsequential in the grand cosmic scheme. The ancient ones, like Cthulhu, do not demand worship in the way human gods do. They are simply forces of nature, indifferent to the lives of the creatures that worship them. The very act of worship is not about appeasing a divine being, but about accepting the futility of resistance to the cosmic order. In addition to Cthulhu, the mythos is populated by a variety of other great old ones, each representing different aspects of the cosmic void. Beings like Nyarlathotep, Yog-Sothoth, and Azathoth function not as traditional gods, but as manifestations of chaos, time, and space. Nyarlathotep, often referred to as the crawling chaos, is a shape-shifting entity that moves through the world, subtly influencing events and manipulating humans. Unlike Cthulhu, Nyarlathotep does not lie dormant in a distant, inaccessible place. He is a trickster and a harbinger of doom, often taking on human form to lead mortals to their destruction. His servants, therefore, are not passive in the same way as Cthulhu's followers. They are often actively complicit in his schemes, driven by an insatiable desire for knowledge or power. Yog-Sothoth, on the other hand, represents the concept of time and space as an interconnected whole. He is a being that exists simultaneously in all times and places, and his understanding of reality is beyond the human mind. To serve Yog-Sothoth is to embrace the dissolution of time as a linear concept, to recognize that all events are happening at once, and that human existence is but a fleeting moment in an eternal continuum. Those who serve Yog-Sothoth often do so out of a desire for forbidden knowledge, seeking to transcend the limitations of the human experience and access the secrets of the cosmos. But this knowledge, as Lovecraft repeatedly shows, comes at a terrible cost. The servants of these cosmic entities often find themselves lost in the labyrinth of time, their identities and sense of self disintegrating as they come to understand the vastness of the universe. In contrast to these more abstract beings, Azathoth represents the chaotic, mindless force at the center of the universe. Often described as the blind idiot god, Azathoth is a being of pure chaos, whose unconscious existence is the foundation of all creation. Azathoth's servants, if they can be called that, are not actively seeking knowledge or power, but are often driven by a more fundamental need to surrender to the primordial chaos that Azathoth embodies. In this sense, Azathoth's followers are the most tragic of Lovecraft's servants, for they serve not out of desire, but because they are caught in the pull of an ancient force that has no concern for their well-being. Their servitude is less about religious devotion and more about an inescapable submission to the chaotic, meaningless nature of the universe. These beings, while different in their nature and influence, all share a fundamental trait. They are indifferent to human life. Their servitude is not about loyalty or devotion, but about the inevitability of exposure to a cosmic truth that humans were never meant to comprehend. The servants in this sense are not agents of the great old ones, but rather victims of their power. They serve not because they want to, but because they cannot escape the overwhelming truth that these beings represent. This cosmic indifference is key to understanding why the servants of Cthulhu are not presented as villains, but as tragic figures caught in a system beyond their control. Their servitude is not an act of evil, but a response to the recognition that the universe is vast, chaotic, and ultimately indifferent to human existence. As we move forward, we will explore how human interaction and madness function within the mythos, examining how these servants' relationship with these cosmic forces leads to psychological breakdowns and existential despair. The next section will delve into the way these interactions shape the actions and fates of those who serve the great old ones. The interaction between humanity and the cosmic entities of the Cthulhu Mythos is marked by one inevitable consequence: madness. This is not merely the result of exposure to strange or terrifying phenomena, but a profound psychological unraveling caused by the recognition that the universe is far larger, far older, and far more indifferent than human beings can comprehend. The servants of Cthulhu, and other great old ones, are not only bound to these entities by ritual or belief, they are shaped mentally and emotionally by their interaction with forces that exist beyond the human experience. In this section, we will explore how these entities impact the human mind, driving the servants to madness and, ultimately, to a loss of self-identity. At the core of this madness is the concept of epistemic collapse, the idea that the human mind is not equipped to handle the vastness and complexity of the cosmos. In Lovecraft's view, knowledge is not something that empowers or enlightens. It is something that consumes. To seek knowledge of the great old ones, to peer too deeply into the cosmic void, is to encounter a truth so alien and incomprehensible that it fractures the mind. The servants of Cthulhu, like the narrator in The Call of Cthulhu, often begin as ordinary individuals, scientists, artists, or academics, who seek to uncover hidden truths. But once they are exposed to these truths, their minds begin to unravel. This madness is not simply a reaction to horror. It is a psychological response to the insurmountable gulf between human cognition and the knowledge they seek. The more they know, the less they can understand, and in this collapse of understanding, they lose their sense of self. The protagonist of The Call of Cthulhu provides a poignant example of this psychological breakdown. As he delves deeper into the mystery of Cthulhu and the cult that worships it, he becomes increasingly aware of the limitations of human perception. The more he uncovers, the more his mind begins to fragment, as he realizes that the forces behind Cthulhu and the other great old ones are beyond human understanding. This is not just a moment of terror, but an existential crisis. The servant, or would-be servant, is faced with the horrifying recognition that their entire understanding of reality is insufficient to comprehend the true nature of the cosmos. This psychological conflict results in a gradual loss of sanity, not because the servant is directly harmed by Cthulhu, but because the very act of understanding brings them face to face with the ultimate futility of existence. In many ways, Lovecraft's servants embody the tragic consequences of knowledge itself. The servants are not drawn to Cthulhu out of a desire for power or glory, but because they are compelled by the search for truth, a truth that, once uncovered, proves too much for the human mind to bear. This is especially clear in Lovecraft's depiction of artistic obsession, a theme that recurs throughout his work. In stories like The Shadow over Innsmouth and The Haunter of the Dark, artists and writers who become obsessed with uncovering the hidden truths of the universe often find themselves drawn into the cults of Cthulhu. They serve not because they want to, but because they are compelled by an intellectual and emotional drive to uncover the impossible. This obsession is not the pursuit of enlightenment, but the pursuit of an impossible truth that ultimately drives the individual to madness. The madness of these servants, however, is not always immediate or violent. It often manifests slowly over time as the individual comes to terms with their own insignificance. Lovecraft's writings often portray this gradual descent into madness, where the servants become increasingly disillusioned with the world around them. The more they learn, the more they begin to see the world through the lens of cosmic futility. This slow decay of the mind is most evident in stories like The Dunwich Horror, where the protagonist, Wilbur Whately, is drawn into the orbit of Cthulhu's servants. Wilbur's obsession with uncovering the secrets of the universe leads him to take increasingly drastic and dangerous actions, culminating in his own undoing. His madness is not immediate, but rather a cumulative effect of his growing understanding of a universe that cares nothing for humanity. This gradual madness is integral to understanding the nature of servitude in the mythos. The servants are not compelled by external forces alone. They are shaped by their own minds, by their drive to know what they were never meant to understand. It is not just the presence of Cthulhu that drives them mad, but the confrontation with knowledge that exposes their own fragility. The fear is not simply that Cthulhu exists, but that existence itself is ultimately meaningless, a realization that, once fully understood, leads to a breakdown of all cognitive structures. Moreover, the madness of the servants is often contagious, spreading to others in their immediate circle. In The Shadow over Innsmouth, for example, the protagonist's exposure to the inhabitants of the town, who have given themselves over to the Deep Ones, leads him to question his own sense of identity and sanity. The madness is not only personal, but social. Those who come into contact with the servants are often left with the same existential crisis. This contagion reflects Lovecraft's broader fear that the knowledge of cosmic indifference will not remain confined to isolated individuals, but will eventually spread to the larger human collective, eroding the very foundations of civilization. In Lovecraft's universe, madness is not just a personal breakdown, it is a cosmic consequence. The servants of Cthulhu, in their quest for truth, are exposed to the fundamental absurdity of existence, and their madness is a reflection of the larger cosmic truth, that the universe does not operate according to human logic, morality, or understanding. The human mind, when exposed to such incomprehensible knowledge, cannot help but break down. This inevitable madness is not a side effect of the cults, but a necessary component of servitude. To serve Cthulhu is not to gain power or transcendence. It is to lose oneself in the face of an uncaring universe. The next step in understanding the dynamics of servitude in the mythos is to examine the role of forbidden knowledge. As the servant's madness suggests, Knowledge in Lovecraft's works is not empowering. It is destabilizing. In the Eye, next section, we will explore the epistemic collapse that occurs when the human mind encounters truths it was never meant to understand. This collapse is the ultimate consequence of servitude, a complete breakdown of the individual's understanding of reality. In the Cthulhu Mythos, knowledge is not simply a tool for discovery. It is a force that reshapes the human mind, often with devastating consequences. One of the central tenets of Lovecraft's cosmic horror is the idea of forbidden knowledge, a concept that suggests there are truths in the universe so vast, so incomprehensible, that exposure to them is tantamount to self-destruction. This knowledge, often sought by Lovecraft's characters, whether scholars, artists, or cultists, leads not to enlightenment, but to epistemic collapse. The moment one comes face to face with these truths, the mind begins to unravel, and the individual's grasp on reality slips away. The servants of Cthulhu, who dedicate themselves to the pursuit of this forbidden knowledge, are not elevated by it, but destroyed. Lovecraft explores this theme through characters who, in their search for answers, encounter truths that shatter their understanding of the universe. In The Call of Cthulhu, the protagonist uncovers a series of fragmented accounts, dreams, journals, and reports that point to the existence of an ancient, alien force beyond human comprehension. As he pieces together the mystery, he experiences an escalating sense of unease, culminating in a chilling realization. The knowledge he has uncovered is not meant to be known. It is a truth so immense, so indifferent, that it renders human concerns meaningless. The protagonist does not gain insight or power from his discovery, but rather loses his sense of self. His exposure to this knowledge is the catalyst for his madness. The very act of uncovering the truth becomes a source of disintegration, as he can no longer reconcile the reality of his existence with the vast, uncaring cosmos he has come to understand. This epistemic collapse is not just a personal breakdown, but a fundamental reordering of the individual's relationship to reality itself. In Lovecraft's worldview, knowledge of the cosmic truths is not liberating, but corrupting. The more one learns, the less one understands. This paradox is embodied in the servants of Cthulhu, who, in their devotion to the great old ones, seek knowledge not to transcend their limitations, but to accept them. The servants are not seeking to master the cosmos, but to come to terms with their own insignificance within it. They serve not out of choice, but because they have realized that to resist the cosmic forces at work is futile. The more they uncover, the more they lose their grasp on human reasoning. Knowledge in this context is a kind of intellectual poison, one that leads the servant away from reality and into a state of madness and despair. Lovecraft's view of knowledge as corrosive is deeply influenced by his broader philosophical outlook. His works reject the Enlightenment-era belief in the power of human reason to master the universe. Instead, Lovecraft suggests that reason is an illusion, and that true knowledge is not something that empowers humanity, but something that reveals its fragility. The concept of forbidden knowledge in the mythos is thus not merely about occult secrets or mystical truths, but about the recognition that there is no ultimate meaning or purpose in the universe. The servants of Cthulhu, in their pursuit of this knowledge, are ultimately seeking not transcendence, but resignation. They are not trying to unlock the mysteries of the universe, but to accept their place in an indifferent cosmos. In this sense, their servitude is not about domination, but submission. The concept of epistemic collapse also ties into Lovecraft's treatment of cosmicism, the idea that humans are not the center of the universe, but are merely one species among many in a vast, indifferent cosmos. In stories like The Shadow over Innsmouth, the protagonist comes into contact with a world that exists outside the normal human experience, one where ancient alien beings exist in parallel to humanity. The knowledge of these beings is not a source of empowerment, but a source of alienation. The more the protagonist learns, the more they feel disconnected from the world they once knew. This sense of alienation is central to the experience of madness in the mythos. The more the servants of Cthulhu uncover, the more they realize that their understanding of the world is fundamentally flawed. The gap between human knowledge and cosmic reality is simply too wide to bridge. The act of serving Cthulhu is, therefore, an act of surrender. The servants, driven by their search for forbidden knowledge, ultimately find themselves at the mercy of forces far greater than they could ever comprehend. Their servitude is not a choice made out of faith or devotion, but an inevitable response to the realization that the universe does not care about human life. This understanding does not lead to a grand revelation or enlightenment, but to a descent into madness, as the servants are unable to reconcile their limited perception of reality with the overwhelming unknowable truths they have uncovered. In the Dunwich Horror, we see this theme of epistemic collapse play out through the character of Wilbur Whately, whose obsessive pursuit of ancient knowledge leads him to summon the horrific entity Yog-Sothoth. Whately's obsession with the forbidden knowledge of the Necronomicon and his attempts to transcend the human experience ultimately result in his destruction. His servitude to the Great Old Ones is marked not by devotion, but by desperation. The desperation to know something beyond human understanding, even if it means losing one's humanity in the process. This idea is central to the functioning of the cults and servants in Lovecraft's stories. Their search for knowledge is not about gaining power, but about coming to terms with their inevitable submission to forces that are beyond human comprehension. The pursuit of forbidden knowledge in Lovecraft's universe leads not to power or transcendence, but to the collapse of the self. The servants of Cthulhu are not made stronger or wiser through their servitude. They are made broken by their exposure to cosmic truths that are simply too vast and too alien to be understood. In this sense, their servitude is both a psychological and metaphysical tragedy. They serve not out of devotion, but out of a tragic acceptance of the universe's inherent indifference. The servants' ultimate fate is not one of fulfillment, but one of complete dissolution, the collapse of their identities and their grasp on reality. As we move forward, we will explore the human experience in more detail, examining how these forces of cosmic horror interact with the very fabric of human existence. We will delve into the specific roles of the cults and the broader cultural implications of their servitude. The earliest and most defining appearance of Cthulhu's servants emerges in H.P. Lovecraft's iconic The Call of Cthulhu, 1928, a story that introduces readers to the vast, unknowable horror at the heart of the Cthulhu Mythos. The cultists who serve Cthulhu are not glorified or romanticized. They are presented as tragic victims of forces they cannot comprehend, driven to worship not out of choice, but out of a compulsive response to the vast cosmic truths they have discovered. This early introduction of Cthulhu's servants shapes the trajectory of their role throughout the mythos. They are not malicious agents of evil, but suffering figures caught in the gravitational pull of an uncaring, incomprehensible universe. In the Call of Cthulhu, the servants of the Great Old One, Cthulhu, are largely revealed through fragments of journals, reports, and testimonies from different characters. The narrator, an academic investigating his late granduncle's research into the strange cult, uncovers unsettling accounts of sailors, artists, and investigators who have encountered the terrifying presence of Cthulhu. One of the key aspects of this early story is the fragmented, piecemeal approach through which Lovecraft reveals the cult and its servants. The cultists are not central figures in the narrative, but rather peripheral, distant characters whose involvement in the cosmic horror is secondary to the more immediate terror of Cthulhu itself. The cult's actions, while described in terrifying terms, are not active attempts at conquest or domination. Rather, they are passive, ritualistic responses to a cosmic order far beyond their understanding. This indirect portrayal highlights a key element of Lovecraft's depiction of servitude. The act of serving is not a conscious choice, but a tragic, almost inevitable submission to a force far more ancient and powerful than human beings can comprehend. This is most evident in the sailor's dreams, the artist Henry Anthony Wilcox's strange visions, and the character of Professor Angel, whose research inadvertently leads him to the discovery of the cult and its dark practices. The cultists of Cthulhu, therefore, represent a tragic intersection between knowledge and madness. They are not driven by malevolent will or the desire for power, but by a compulsive need to understand the truth of a universe that does not care about them. Their servitude is a response to an irreversible revelation that humanity is insignificant in the grand scale of cosmic forces, and that resistance to these forces is futile. This cosmic resignation sets the stage for the evolution of servitude within the mythos, as the cultists and their actions are framed as a consequence of exposure to knowledge that was never meant to be known. In Lovecraft's narrative, the horror is not just external, in the form of monstrous entities like Cthulhu, but internal, in the psychological collapse that ensues when the character's understanding of the world is irrevocably shattered. The cultists, therefore, serve not through devotion or loyalty, but through the loss of individual agency in the face of overwhelming cosmic truths. This is exemplified in the recurring motif of dreams, which, for the cultists, are both an escape from and a confrontation with the reality of their servitude. The dreams they experience are not sweet or comforting, but terrifying glimpses into the cosmic unknown, where human beings are powerless and irrelevant. The more the cultists experience these dreams, the less they retain their former selves. Their servitude is not voluntary, but a response to their exposure to cosmic entropy, where knowledge itself becomes a means of unraveling the mind. The early appearances of these servants set up a central narrative function that persists throughout the mythos, the tragic subjugation of humanity to forces beyond human comprehension. In the Call of Cthulhu, the cultists' involvement in the larger narrative does not exist to glorify them, but to reveal the cosmic futility of human existence. The more they serve, the more they are consumed by the very forces they are bound to, reflecting the key theme of inevitable subjugation that runs through the mythos. Lovecraft's servants do not actively fight for control or power. Rather, they are passive figures, responding to a greater cosmic current that they are unable to resist. This depiction of servitude as involuntary resignation is key to understanding the broader implications of the mythos. Lovecraft's servants in this early narrative are also clearly connected to a broader tradition of mythological cults, though his version departs sharply from more conventional depictions of worshippers. Traditional cults in mythology and horror are often portrayed as seeking power, enlightenment, or a deeper connection with the divine. However, the cultists in Lovecraft's stories do not seek power. they seek an understanding that destroys them. Their servitude is an act of passive acceptance of the universe's indifference. The tragic nature of their servitude lies in their submission to forces that do not care for them, as opposed to the active devotion often associated with traditional cults. In these earliest stories, Lovecraft also lays the groundwork for the evolution of the concept of servitude in the mythos. As the mythos expands through other tales, such as The Shadow over Innsmouth and At the Mountains of Madness, the servants evolve from being peripheral figures to central agents of cosmic chaos. Their role in the narrative shifts from mere background elements to active participants in the unraveling of human civilization. As we move forward in the mythos, the concept of servitude becomes more complex, with characters who are not merely passive worshippers, but deeply entangled in the web of cosmic forces. These later stories will build on the foundation established in the Call of Cthulhu, exploring the psychological and existential consequences of servitude in greater depth. The evolution of the servant figure in the mythos is not just a narrative development, but a philosophical one. As Lovecraft's work progresses, the servants of Cthulhu become more tragic, more psychologically complex, and more intimately tied to the cosmic forces they serve. In the next section, we will dive deeper into one of these later, more developed stories, Major Story Case Study Number 1, to explore how the concept of servitude has evolved in the mythos and how it functions on a larger scale. The development of these characters and the narrative weight their servitude carries is a key element in the unfolding cosmic horror of Lovecraft's universe. One of the most notable and chilling explorations of servitude in the Cthulhu Mythos is found in The Shadow over Innsmouth, 1936. This story not only deepens the mythos surrounding Cthulhu and the Great Old Ones, but also provides a vivid case study in the psychological and cultural implications of servitude. The tale centers on a young man, Robert Olmsted, who travels to the decaying fishing town of Innsmouth, only to uncover the town's terrifying connection to ancient aquatic deities, the Deep Ones, and their servitude to Cthulhu. Lovecraft uses the town, its inhabitants, and their relationship to the cosmic horrors to depict servitude not just as a passive submission, but as a distorted, inherited fate, one that involves both personal and communal loss of identity and sanity. Olmsted's journey into Innsmouth begins as a simple curiosity, seeking answers about his family's roots. However, as he delves deeper into the town's strange history and its people's unnerving behavior, he becomes entangled in a long-standing, cult-like servitude to beings who are as indifferent to human life as the ocean depths they inhabit. The people of Innsmouth, it is revealed, are not merely worshippers of the Deep Ones, but have interbred with them, becoming something else entirely. This hybridization is a literal manifestation of servitude. These human beasts are bound to the will of their aquatic overlords, both biologically and psychologically. The nature of servitude in The Shadow over Innsmouth is far more complex than simple worship. The townspeople are not merely practicing ancient rituals in exchange for favor or protection. Instead, their servitude is a compulsion, a biological and psychological inevitability. As Olmsted discovers, the town's citizens have long given themselves over to the Deep Ones in an effort to secure eternal life in the form of a disturbing underwater existence, where they will join the Deep Ones in their endless worship of Cthulhu. The servitude here is not motivated by devotion to a god or entity in a traditional sense, but by the need to maintain the illusion of survival in a world where the forces of nature are vastly superior to human civilization. Lovecraft's depiction of servitude in this case is especially chilling because it involves a generational cycle of decay. The townspeople of Innsmouth are not simply individuals making a conscious choice to serve an ancient alien force. They are born into it. Their families are cursed to continue this cycle of servitude, and even Olmsted himself learns that he is not exempt from this fate. His discovery that he too shares this dark heritage serves as a powerful metaphor for the idea that servitude to the cosmic forces is not a voluntary act, but an inescapable inheritance. The generational nature of this servitude reflects Lovecraft's broader fear of the inescapability of cosmic truths. No matter how far one runs or how much one tries to understand, the pull of these ancient forces cannot be avoided. In terms of narrative function, the story of the Shadow over Innsmouth reveals a key evolution in the concept of servitude in the Cthulhu Mythos. While earlier stories, such as The Call of Cthulhu, presented servitude as something peripheral and often abstract, Innsmouth brings it to a more intimate level, showing how an entire town has surrendered its identity and future to the whims of beings that exist far outside the human experience. The act of serving Cthulhu and the Deep Ones is not simply an intellectual or emotional choice, but a biological transformation, a loss of humanity, a surrender to the ancient forces that shape reality itself. The townspeople's servitude is more than an act of faith. It is a total transformation, affecting every aspect of their lives, from their biology to their worldview. Their servitude becomes their identity, an identity that is defined not by choice, but by an overwhelming cosmic determinism that erases all human agency. What makes the servants of Innsmouth so tragic is that they are fully aware of their subjugation. Unlike the cultists in The Call of Cthulhu, who are often portrayed as victims of their ignorance, the people of Innsmouth have actively embraced their fate. This acceptance of servitude, of becoming something else entirely, highlights Lovecraft's commentary on human fragility and self-delusion. In their attempts to escape the inevitability of death, they have forfeited their humanity, becoming part of a greater, incomprehensible cycle that they can neither control nor fully understand. One of the most unsettling aspects of the story is the final revelation that Olmsted himself is tied to this fate. Upon learning that he is the grandson of an Innsmouth native, he discovers that he, too, is part of the inherited lineage of the town's cursed servitude. His descent into madness upon this revelation reflects Lovecraft's existential horror. Not only does Olmsted lose his sense of self, but he also realizes that this fate is beyond his control. He is irrevocably linked to a cosmic order that operates outside the realm of human morality or understanding. This discovery underscores Lovecraft's central theme. Humanity is insignificant in the face of cosmic forces, and the more we attempt to understand these forces, the more we become subject to them. The narrative function of the servants in The Shadow over Innsmouth serves to expand the concept of servitude in the mythos. Where The Call of Cthulhu framed servitude as a psychological consequence of knowledge, The Shadow over Innsmouth takes it further, showing how biological transformation and generational curse play a role in the inevitability of subjugation. The story introduces a chilling evolution of servitude, one that not only affects the mind, but the very essence of being. The servants of Innsmouth are not just victims. They are transformed by the forces they serve, ultimately losing their humanity to become agents of the Great Old Ones. This shift in the depiction of servitude provides important context for understanding the larger cosmic order in the mythos. In the next section, we will explore major story case study number 2, where the servitude theme evolves further, taking on new forms and deeper implications. This study will allow us to see how Lovecraft continued to refine and expand the concept of servitude throughout his work, shedding light on its philosophical and existential consequences. Another key narrative in the development of the concept of servitude in the Cthulhu Mythos is At the Mountains of Madness, 1936, where Lovecraft expands the scope of servitude from isolated cults to a more deeply ingrained cosmic determinism that reaches across time and space. Unlike the Shadow over Innsmouth, where the cult's servitude to the Deep Ones is primarily driven by a desperate, localized need to survive, At the Mountains of Madness reveals a much broader and ancient cosmic system, where servitude is not simply a human response to Cthulhu, or its immediate minions, but an inextricable part of the universe's vast machinery. The story is a chilling exploration of how servitude to the cosmic entities of the mythos operates on a multidimensional scale, transcending human time and reaching back to the oldest ages of the earth. In At the Mountains of Madness, the protagonist, Dr. William Dyer, leads an expedition to Antarctica, where they discover the ruins of an ancient alien civilization, the Elder Things. These beings, it is revealed, were not just a precursor to humanity, but were forced servants to even older and more powerful cosmic entities. As the team uncovers the tragic history of the Elder Things, they learn that these beings were subjugated by the Great Old Ones, including Cthulhu, whose cosmic influence had spread to even the farthest reaches of the earth. The Elder Things' servitude was not an act of worship or reverence, but a functional submission to a higher, incomprehensible order, dictated by the unspeakable entities that governed their existence. This revelation shifts the framework of servitude in the mythos. Rather than being a localized phenomenon involving isolated cults and worshippers, servitude here is revealed as a universal condition, one that stretches back through the ages and across the cosmos. The Elder Things are not willing servants, but are enslaved by a larger cosmic order, one in which they have no agency or choice. Their servitude is not an act of devotion, but a subjugation to beings whose powers and motives are far beyond their comprehension. Lovecraft illustrates that this servitude is an inescapable fate for those who encounter the Great Old Ones, whether they are human, Elder Things, or any other life form. The narrative function of the Elder Things story within At the Mountains of Madness is key to understanding how servitude in the mythos operates as a systemic and inevitable process. In the case of the Elder Things, servitude is a result of their creation by these cosmic forces, suggesting that servitude is not just a voluntary act, but one inherent in their very being. This idea deepens the tragic nature of Lovecraft's servants. Their servitude is not an isolated incident, but a universal condition imposed by the cosmic hierarchy of ancient beings that transcend time and space. The Elder Things are forced to serve, not because they choose to, but because their very existence is tied to the greater, indifferent forces that shaped them. Lovecraft also introduces a new layer to servitude in the form of epistemic discovery. The knowledge the expedition uncovers is not only about the Elder Things, but also about the true, horrifying scale of the cosmic forces at play. The deeper the characters delve into the ancient history of these beings, the more they lose their grasp on reality. This mirrors the experiences of Lovecraft's earlier protagonists, who, when exposed to forbidden knowledge, begin to unravel psychologically. Dyer's descent into fear and madness as he realizes the full extent of humanity's Insignificance in the face of these ancient forces is a central thematic element. In this sense, the servitude of the elder things is mirrored in the psychological subjugation of the human characters. By uncovering the truth about the universe, they are not empowered but irreversibly changed, coming to terms with their own fragility in the face of cosmic indifference. The servitude theme is expanded through the use of time and history. Unlike the servants in Innsmouth, who are caught in a cycle of genetic decay and worship, the elder thing's servitude spans epochs, indicating that this cosmic system of subjugation is not bound to any one species or period of time. The scale of the servitude becomes apparent as the history of the earth itself is revealed to be a series of cycles of dominance by these ancient beings, each one imposing their will on the species beneath them. In this way, Lovecraft illustrates the timelessness of cosmic power and the inevitability of servitude within this larger cosmic framework. Through the introduction of the elder things and their ancient history, Lovecraft elevates the concept of servitude from a mere plot device to a cosmic inevitability. These beings are not passive worshippers of Cthulhu. They are victims of a cosmic order that they cannot escape. Their servitude, like that of Cthulhu's human followers, is not a conscious choice, but an inextricable part of their existence. This aligns with Lovecraft's broader philosophy of cosmicism, where human beings, and by extension all life, are subject to forces that are far beyond their comprehension or control. The elder things, in their servitude, are no more in control of their fate than the humans who follow Cthulhu. Both are caught in the tide of cosmic forces that have no regard for their autonomy or agency. The implications of servitude in At the Mountains of Madness are far-reaching. By showing the elder things' servitude as a result of their creation by the Great Old, Lovecraft suggests that servitude is not merely a matter of worship or voluntary submission, but an inherent condition for all beings who encounter these forces. It is a cosmic determinism, not shaped by choice, but by the very fabric of the universe itself. This revelation elevates the concept of servitude to a universal truth, one that transcends species, time, and even the human experience. The concept of servitude, as depicted through the elder things, sets the stage for the exploration of servitude in future stories, expanding the mythos' scope and deepening its existential implications. In the next section, we will examine the later expansion of the mythos, focusing on how Lovecraft's evolving worldview influenced his development of the servitude theme, and how later writers continued to expand upon it. This expansion of the concept will further illuminate the complex and tragic nature of servitude within the Cthulhu mythos. While Lovecraft's stories initially framed servitude as a central component of cosmic horror, it is through the collaboration with and influence on other writers within the Lovecraft circle that the concept of servitude truly expanded within the Cthulhu mythos. Writers such as August Derleth, Robert E. Howard, and Clark Ashton Smith each took elements from Lovecraft's works and broadened the scope of servitude, contributing their own interpretations of cosmic power, worship, and inevitable submission. These later contributions did not just serve to flesh out the mythos, but transformed the idea of servitude into a multifaceted and evolving concept, making it one of the defining features of Lovecraftian horror. August Derleth, in particular, played a critical role in the posthumous development of the Cthulhu mythos. After Lovecraft's death, Derleth took many of Lovecraft's ideas and expanded them, often formalizing elements of the mythos that Lovecraft had left ambiguous. In stories like The Lurker at the Threshold, 1941, and The Trail of Cthulhu, 1944, Derleth introduced a more structured system of cosmic entities and their interactions with humanity. His expansions, however, introduced moralistic dimensions to the mythos that were less evident in Lovecraft's original work. Where Lovecraft had emphasized the cosmic indifference of the great old ones, Derleth introduced the idea that these beings were divided into forces of good, the so-called lesser gods, and evil, the elder gods, thus imbuing the servitude of the great old ones with more clearly defined moral roles. While Lovecraft's servants were depicted as tragic figures caught in the webs of fate, Derleth's cultists often took on a more active, even willful role in their worship. Derleth's interpretation changed the nature of servitude in the mythos from a passive act of acceptance to something that sometimes involved intentional devotion, a shift that expanded the scope of servitude beyond its original concept as a tragic resignation. However, this alteration in the portrayal of servitude can be seen as both an expansion and a dilution of Lovecraft's central theme of cosmicism. Where Lovecraft's servants were primarily victims of a cosmic order beyond comprehension, Derleth's cultists often had clear motives, including a desire for power, immortality, or knowledge. This moral structure added a layer of narrative clarity, but it also softened the existential horror that Lovecraft's original stories conveyed. The introduction of a more defined good versus evil dynamic in Derleth's work, for instance, subtly shifts the focus from the unimaginable vastness of cosmic indifference to the struggle between forces, undermining the pervasive sense of helplessness that Lovecraft's servants embodied. In contrast, Robert E. Howard and Clark Ashton Smith remained closer to Lovecraft's vision, focusing on the tragic nature of servitude and the indifference of the universe. Howard, best known for his Conan the Barbarian stories, was heavily influenced by Lovecraft's cosmicism, and the interaction of his characters with Lovecraftian forces echoes themes of futility and existential despair. In his story The Black Stone, 1931, Howard touches upon the theme of servitude when a group of men, unknowingly linked to ancient, dark powers, are drawn into the orbit of a mysterious artifact, the titular Black Stone. While the characters are not directly involved in a cult, the looming presence of this object and the invisible influence of the forces it represents parallels the reluctant servitude found in Lovecraft's work. Like Lovecraft's cultists, Howard's characters are unwittingly enslaved by forces they do not fully understand. The servitude in Howard's stories is often not voluntary. Rather, it is the unavoidable consequence of human involvement with something beyond human control. Clark Ashton Smith, another key figure in the Cthulhu Mythos, similarly explored servitude through the lens of tragedy and inevitability. His stories, such as The Dark Eidolon, 1935, are often more overtly fantastical, but they still echo Lovecraft's themes of cosmic futility. In his tale, The Dark Eidolon, a ruler attempts to bring about his own vengeance through forbidden knowledge, only to fall victim to the uncontrollable forces he summons. Smith's characters, like those in Lovecraft's work, serve unseen, incomprehensible powers, often with tragic consequences. His stories, while more poetic and lush in their descriptions, are similarly concerned with the psychological collapse that comes from engaging with entities beyond mortal comprehension. Smith's exploration of servitude mirrors Lovecraft's, portraying it as an inevitable, tragic submission to an ungraspable cosmic order. The contributions of these writers illustrate how the core concept of servitude within the Cthulhu mythos evolved over time. While Lovecraft's servants are typically tragic victims, Caught in an inescapable cosmic web, Derleth's portrayal often emphasizes the volition of servitude, transforming it into a more active, conscious choice. This shift introduces moral dimensions to the mythos, which had not been central in Lovecraft's original conception. However, the other writers in the mythos, like Howard and Smith, maintained the tragic nature of servitude, emphasizing that it is not a moral choice, but an inescapable consequence of the cosmic forces at play. This range of approaches not only expanded the narrative possibilities within the mythos, but also showcased the philosophical breadth of Lovecraft's cosmic horror. Ultimately, the expansion of servitude across these writers reflects the adaptability of Lovecraft's vision. While the mythos has grown into a multifaceted tapestry of interconnected stories, the central theme remains the same. The cosmic forces of the universe are indifferent, and humans, in their servitude, are powerless to resist them. The evolution of servitude, from Lovecraft's tragic figures to Derleth's more active cultists, serves to deepen our understanding of the cosmic framework that binds these characters together, showing that in the face of cosmic forces, there is no true escape, only resignation. In the next section, we will explore how cultural and psychological interpretations have further shaped the legacy of servitude in the mythos, tracing its influence across film, games, and other media. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Cthulhu Mythos is the way its mythology has bled into real-world culture. The very concept of forbidden knowledge and secret cults has become a cultural meme, not just in literature, but in urban legends and contemporary hoaxes. This convergence between fiction and reality, where myth starts to resemble truth, is part of what makes Lovecraft's work so unsettling. By presenting his cosmic horrors as hidden truths, Lovecraft invites us to wonder whether there is something beyond the veil of reality that we're not meant to comprehend. This sense of danger, of the unknown being out there, quietly influencing the world, lingers in the dark corners of our collective psyche, contributing to the ongoing myth building that keeps the mythos alive in modern culture. The persistence of real-world sightings and encounters with entities like Cthulhu or the Deep Ones speaks to the psychological power of Lovecraft's work. Many contemporary conspiracy theories and urban legends echo Lovecraftian themes, groups operating in secrecy, ancient knowledge that is dangerous to uncover, and cryptic messages in the form of mysterious texts. For instance, the Necronomicon, Lovecraft's invented grimoire, has become almost a real artifact, with various authors and occultists claiming to have translated or even encountered versions of it. This is part of the myth-making process, where fiction is adopted, altered, and reinterpreted until it seems to be factual. In the world of conspiracy theorists, Lovecraft's creations often blend seamlessly with real-world occult traditions, giving rise to groups and subcultures that claim to follow these ancient cosmic beings. The idea that secret cults or hidden organizations are dedicated to serving powerful, invisible forces is not merely a relic of horror fiction. It is part of the cultural fabric. Hoaxes involving sightings of strange creatures or mysterious events often draw from the same pool of Lovecraftian inspiration, making it difficult to separate the fictional from the real. This sense of uncertainty keeps people engaged with the mythos, as it taps into a primal fear that knowledge itself can be a curse, leading us to question what might lie just beneath the surface of our world. The concept of servitude in this context takes on a new layer. In real-life hoaxes, the idea of servitude is often framed as something that mimics real devotion, whether through ritualistic behaviors, coded languages, or the pursuit of esoteric truths. Just as the cultists of Cthulhu serve without fully understanding the consequences, modern cultists often follow leaders or doctrines without fully comprehending the larger, potentially destructive forces at play. The mystique around these groups, whether based in truth or fiction, mirrors the servitude found in Lovecraft's work. They exist as invisible forces, often with little understanding of their own power or the harm they cause. Lovecraft's legacy has thus taken on a life of its own, where fictional elements have been adopted by subcultures that see them as potentially real. This phenomenon shows the enduring psychological pull of the mythos. The idea that there are secret forces operating in the world, hidden from most people, that wield power over individuals in ways they can't begin to comprehend. This blending of myth and reality ensures that the fear Lovecraft instilled in readers continues to evolve and resonate as it reflects a universal human anxiety about the unknowable and uncontrollable forces that might be at work in our lives. As we move forward in the mythos's cultural impact, it's crucial to understand why this particular theme persists in contemporary culture. What makes Lovecraft's servitude so enduring? The answer lies in the psychological nature of the fear it evokes. The fear of being insignificant in a world governed by forces far greater than ourselves. And the fear that perhaps, without realizing it, we might already be serving them. These are not the stories of classical villains. They are stories of victims caught in an endless cycle of cosmic submission. And it is this tragic, universal aspect of servitude that makes the mythos so compelling to modern audiences. The influence of the Cthulhu mythos on contemporary media, particularly in film, video games, and music, demonstrates how deeply the concepts of servitude, cosmic horror, and existential futility have embedded themselves into modern storytelling. Lovecraft's work, while never widely recognized during his lifetime, has since become a foundational influence on the horror genre. The persistent imagery of servants worshiping ancient cosmic deities has seeped into mainstream films and games, shaping how we engage with themes of power, submission, and the unknowable forces lurking just beyond our perception. In film, Lovecraft's influence is perhaps most notably seen in movies like John Carpenter's The Thing, 1982, and Neil Blomkamp's District 9, 2009. While these films do not directly adapt Lovecraft's stories, they echo his themes of alien servitude, the loss of self-identity, and the breakdown of reality when faced with cosmic forces. The Thing, for instance, focuses on a shape-shifting alien creature that infiltrates a remote Antarctic base, subtly turning humans into its servants without their awareness or consent. The alien's nature, both monstrous and unknowable, captures the essence of Lovecraftian horror, a force that does not simply seek to destroy, but to alter the very fabric of humanity. Similarly, District 9 explores themes of human exploitation by an alien race, paralleling the subjugation and servitude of Cthulhu's followers in its portrayal of dehumanization and the loss of autonomy. In the world of video games, Lovecraft's influence has left a profound mark on titles like Bloodborne, 2015, and Call of Cthulhu, Dark Corners of the Earth, 2005. Bloodborne, for example, revolves around a secretive cult worshipping unknowable cosmic beings and seeking forbidden knowledge, leading to corruption, madness, and eventual servitude. The player character, an outsider seeking to uncover the truth, gradually discovers that they too are enmeshed in a larger cosmic process. Much like Lovecraft's protagonists, the player is drawn into a horrifying cycle of fate, in which knowledge only leads to psychological destruction. Kaldheim of Cthulhu's adaptation, rooted in Lovecraft's original story, allows players to experience firsthand the madness that comes with discovering the hidden truths of the mythos, reinforcing the theme of servitude as an unavoidable consequence of exposure to forbidden knowledge. Lovecraft's impact on music is no less profound, with numerous bands and genres drawing from the mythos to craft atmospheric existential soundscapes that evoke the cosmic indifference of his universe. Bands like Metallica and The Sword have incorporated references to Cthulhu and cosmic horror into their lyrics and imagery. Metallica's The Call of Cthulhu, 1984, and The Sword's Freya, 2008, both explore themes of cosmic doom and the futility of human resistance, invoking the image of servitude without overtly referencing Lovecraft's works. This musical adaptation adds another layer to Lovecraft's influence, as listeners become immersed in a soundscape that mirrors the inevitability of cosmic submission depicted in his stories. In each of these adaptations, the core themes of servitude and cosmic horror persist, albeit in different forms. Whether through alien worship, psychological degradation, or existential futility, Lovecraft's vision continues to inform how modern media grapples with the idea of human insignificance in the face of vast, uncaring forces. The longevity and adaptability of these themes underscore their universal resonance, tapping into a shared human fear that remains relevant, regardless of time or medium. The question remains, why does the theme of servitude persist so powerfully in modern culture? The lasting appeal of the Cthulhu mythos can be partially attributed to its subcultural appropriation, where Lovecraft's ideas have been reinterpreted and reimagined by various groups and academic movements. In the realm of academia, Lovecraft's works are often analyzed through the lens of philosophy, psychology, and cultural studies, where scholars engage with his themes not just as fiction, but as meditations on human fear and existential despair. His portrayal of servitude, especially in relation to the cosmic forces of the mythos, is examined as a reflection of humanity's deeper anxieties about the nature of existence. Within subcultures, Lovecraft's work has fueled the rise of occult groups and role-playing communities that both honor and subvert his original themes. For instance, occult practitioners have adopted elements of the mythos as part of their rituals and ideologies, often blending Lovecraftian themes with traditional occult practices. Similarly, role-playing games like Call of Cthulhu have given fans a way to actively engage with the mythos, making the concept of servitude to Cthulhu an interactive experience rather than a passive one. These appropriations show how Lovecraft's work continues to influence subcultures by providing a narrative framework that both questions and engages with ideas of power, submission, and the unknown. The continuing fascination with Lovecraft's concept of servitude lies in its psychological and philosophical depth. The idea that knowledge of the cosmic void leads to servitude is more than just a literary device. It touches on universal human fears. The servitude of Cthulhu's followers is not simply about worship, but about accepting the inevitability of their submission to a universe that operates without moral structure or concern for humanity. In the modern era, this resonates with deep anxieties about our own role in the universe, the limitations of human understanding, and the growing recognition that there are forces far beyond our control. The enduring appeal of Lovecraft's work suggests that the fear of insignificance and the unknowable forces that may govern our existence remains one of the most primal and powerful fears we face.